Need to
Hey, I
remove
think
Dave's name.
yeah, I hope Dave will join us. Welcome to Open Faith Discussion, our talk of Christ, faith, family, and adventure. That's my channel. We are doing today a discussion about, sorry about this. Let me stop sharing my screen. Discussion about Dan McClellan, who is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a TikTok star, according to Jenna Reese. So I want to share an article by Jenna Reese from the Salt Lake Tribune. This is published yesterday. Let's see, share my screen. Which one? This one right here. More than 250,000 followers enjoy Dan McClellan's unusual combination of deadpan humor and solid biblical scholarship. And I came across this article today. If I'm being honest, I read it during sacrament meeting. And this is my first introduction to him. Do not have a TikTok account, do not watch TikTok, have only been shown a handful of videos by my children. So I am older than that. But we have biblical scholars don't normally get recognized by fans in public. But this guy apparently has people running up to him at Disneyland and saying, "Oh, hey, I really like you." And his 13-year-old makes fun of him for having fans on TikTok. And, followers are sometimes surprised to learn that he's an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Talks about his mission here a little bit. And he explains in his pinned video, he's not here to represent the church in any way, shape, or form, or to speak authoritatively or representatively on their behalf, although he is a key player in the church's sacred materials translation department or section or whatever. He works for the church. He's a full-time church employee. And background. I'm going to find his background in here. Here we are. He has several Bible nerd publications to his credit, including a new open access book published by the Society of Biblical Literature's publishing arm, and articles in academic journals such as the Journal of Biblical Literature and Biblical Interpretation. And anybody see his background here? Where does it talk about his degree?
You go to some divinity school?
Yeah, he went to BYU, I know. And then should have been ready with this. There we go. He went back to school and got an undergraduate degree in Near Eastern Studies from Brigham Young University, 2 master's degrees, and a doctorate later. Okay, that doesn't tell us where he got those, or what they're in. So there you have it. So for all we know, that his credentials in regard to biblical studies have to do with his Near Eastern studies and his publications. And then we have his videos with most views, more than 4 million and counting. His video with the most views takes on a creator exasperated with the BBC headline, "God's wife edited out of the Bible." Almost. I think I may have seen that video. I have to go look for that here. I'm going to click here to open up his. The topic happens to be the subject on which his own doctoral supervisor wrote her thesis. So it sounds like his doctorate was related to something along these lines, right? And he says, I went on to explain why she was exactly right. And then it had millions of views. All right. So talk to me, guys. Have either of you then heard about him before today? What's your experience with him? And then we're going to jump in and watch a couple of his videos. I learned about him today. I watched about a half dozen of his videos today, and that's it. And so for me, we might be watching a video I haven't seen before and then commenting on.
So yeah, I have some friends that have brought him to my attention. I can't say I've seen a lot of his stuff, but yeah, he just seems to, I used the word apologist earlier. You didn't like that, but he just seems to be like a church apologist, not only for the church, but also his politics. So
I swear I've heard of him before. His name rings a bell for me. I don't know where or when. Quick Googling just now. Apparently, he did a debate against James White, who is a reformed guy that I follow. And so maybe I saw flyers advertising that debate when it happened a couple of years ago. I'm not sure where else I've heard of him. I'm probably thinking of someone else, but I swear there was somebody who did a lot of writing for Fair, was involved in like the church history department or something. He's probably a different guy, probably not the same name, but a similar name. So I don't know. I honestly don't know if I've heard of him or not. When I looked him up just now and watched a couple of his videos, he didn't look familiar to me at all. So I probably haven't ever run across any of his stuff, but I'm interested to do a totally blind reaction to his stuff today.
Yeah, I would wonder, I would be interested in I mean, I would think that Ms. Reese in her article here would have mentioned his Fair background or something if he did that, but I don't know, maybe not. And then just to comment on why I took any issue in our back channel about calling him an apologist, I guess there's a feeling or a negative connotation with that word apologist for some reason. And if we talked about that or wanted to spend time on that, we can figure out why that is. But I didn't feel in this half dozen videos I've seen so far, and from what I read from this article in the Tribune, that he was actually taking a defensive stance to defend the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or Christianity or whatever, because in fact, in the half dozen videos that I saw, it seemed that they were leaning kind of either way. They were just simply trying to tear down, as she says in her article, the article says she debunks, LDS TikTok star debunks Bible conspiracies and misinformation. So yeah, I don't know if defending the Bible, but trying to debunk misinformation seemed to be the point to me. That's how I was introduced. So let's jump in here. There we go. Let's go to this most famous one then first, and I have not seen it. So I'm going to share this screen, and I think that it is going to come with the sound. Let me know if you can't hear it for some reason.
You ever just...
Hey everybody, this article is almost 10 years old. That Oxford scholar is now the head of theology and religion at Exeter University. That is Francesca Stavrakopoulou. She is a very good friend of mine and my dissertation supervisor. She's also 100% right. Asherah worship, recognition of Asherah as the consort or wife of Yahweh was 100% normative prior to the reign of Josiah, his campaign of cult centralization, and then the events of the exile. We have no text from the Hebrew Bible we can confidently date prior to Josiah that marginalize or vilify Asherah. They all date to Josiah or the exilic period, such as the two texts mentioned by that creator. They try to rewrite earlier history and earlier traditions in order to vilify Asherah. An example, the contest of Elijah with the priests of Baal mentions Asherah's priests in the very beginning, and they vanish from the narrative because they were a later addition to the text.
Wow. Yeah, all right, jump in. I can see some apologetics in that one. I will admit to that. Okay, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
I don't know what he's talking about. So I don't know if I can even respond.
Okay, so in our back channel, have we mentioned our back channel in a while? We have a chat room going on. And Marty suggested that I tell people my background, and I did quickly update my name in the Zoom. I realized it was like a username or something. But so yeah, I am formerly LDS and now currently a Reformed evangelical Christian. And so my take on this is going to be, well, I don't know what my take is going to be, honestly. But I'm coming from the evangelical Christian background. I am an inerrantist. I believe in the inerrancy of the Bible. And so this is exactly the kind of thing that gets someone like me rankled up who doesn't understand like the LDS background, right? I think I get less rankled up by it because I do understand the LDS background of where he's coming from, but we would obviously want to preserve the idea that the Bible is monotheist, right? This idea that there might have been a wife of God, and that it somehow there's been this conspiracy cover up, right? And that like that is anathema to us, it's heretical to us. And so this is why people would think that he's not a Christian, because he's going and defending the critical scholarship that says, no, actually, there's been this crazy conspiracy cover up. But he's doing it from the standpoint of his own religion, which does believe in Heavenly Mother. And so this is, I mean, this is on the level with like, me and Steve have had conversations about like, the plan of salvation or something, right? Where and this goes back, I'm going to bring up like free will and all this stuff, but like we have these conversations about like what is Satan's goal and what is God's goal. And it's almost like when we compare Latter-day Saint doctrine to Reformed doctrine, it's like the polar opposite. Like God's plan in my view is Satan's plan in Steve's view, and vice versa. Like it's such a stark contrast. And to me, it's like, oh, Mormons are going in and espousing and being apologists for, if we want to use that loaded term, apparently loaded now. I don't think it's loaded, but apparently the younger generations think that term's loaded. But anyway, he's going to be an apologist for this critical scholarship that is trying to spin a different narrative on what we would traditionally have seen that the Bible, teaches. And here's a Latter-day Saint totally defending that and saying, yes, this is good. This bolsters my religion and not the other way around. Just highlights the stark contrast between our two like faith traditions, our two doctrinal systems. I'm not an Old Testament scholar, so I'm not in any position to comment on whether he's right or wrong, or the scholarship that's behind what he's saying. But certainly as an inerrantist, as a monotheist, and as a person who believes that the Bible teaches monotheism, my gut reaction, my cognitive, what do you call that? Confirmation bias, right, is telling me, no, he must be wrong. There must be something behind what he's saying that's wrong. But I'm not qualified to comment on it because I'm no scholar. So and that's my reaction too, is that I
essentially agree with everything you said in this case, that these are TikTok videos, and that thing was super short. We didn't see the other argument that he's saying, yeah, she's right. And
it does make me want to go and read the article he's commenting on, right? But then also go and, if I could get it somewhere, the dissertation, and read that,
the thing here is that there is no evidence provided of what he said. He simply said, we have this.
It's a lack of evidence.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you're going to get your information or knowledge from TikTok, this is not providing it. But the thing is, I think what he's trying to do is that people are getting their information. They are getting their knowledge from TikTok and from brief little things. And people are coming on TikTok and spouting what he believes is misinformation. And so he's just jumping on to give another TikTok view. And now, once you've heard them both, I would think that he would encourage you, go really study this thing, And so I don't.
Yeah, the most you can do on a TikTok is a hot take. You can't
exactly
dive into it. And
when it comes to Asherah, go ahead.
But it's like a footnote, right? It's like, I need to get this out here, this 20-second long video, to hopefully pique people's interest and get them to go follow the footnote and look up the source. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm going back to looking at here. Let me share the screen one more time here, because it just says, God's wife edited out of the Bible almost. God had a wife, Asherah, whom the book of Kings suggests was worshipped alongside Yahweh in his temple in Israel, according to an Oxford scholar. So now we have and then he just he supports this. So there's some Oxford scholar who has claimed this.
But the article that he's headlining here, is that article disagreeing? Does the article take a stance against? And so that's why he feels the need to defend. Yeah,
I don't know. That's a great point. So we have an Oxford scholar apparently who says this is what happened. Asherah edited out and she was God's wife. The Science News article saying the Oxford scholar says this, but you're asking, does the Science News article support the Oxford Scholar or not? Then we have the woman who made the TikTok, and then we have him reacting to her TikTok. So
he was reacting to another lady's TikTok? We watched that one? Or did he clip part of it at the very start and I missed it?
What I heard him say was that the lady who made the TikTok was someone who he worked with on his dissertation or something like that. And then he said, and she's right. Her TikTok is right. So we've got him supporting her TikTok, which comments on the title of at least this article from Science News, which is about something written by an Oxford scholar. We are far removed from the scholarly work on this.
Oh,
and
all right.
Yeah, and he has simply all he said was something about we don't have any what was he saying? We don't have any writings predating the time of Josiah that don't include Asherah worship with Yahweh. Well, my first thing is my understanding, and I'm not a biblical scholar either, but I like to dabble in this stuff. My understanding is we don't have any writings that predate Josiah, period. Like basically most people, my understanding is that most writings come from after that time point, that Josiah is kind of the historical turning point, the linchpin where things after that become more historical, and things before that scientists or scholars argue may have been more legendary. And so therefore we're going with up until the historical time frame, legend has it that God had a wife. And so anyway,
if that's correct, then yeah, what he's saying is a tiny bit disingenuous. If he says, "Oh, no writings prior to," that's like me saying, there are no writings prior to the earliest tablets that have been recovered from like Ur, that say that my cat isn't the God of the universe, therefore my cat must probably be the God of the universe. It's kind of to say that there's no writings prior to Josiah. If you're right that maybe there's almost nothing prior to Josiah anyway, and so it kind of doesn't matter. It's like a non-argument,
So we don't know. We're not the biblical scholars to comment on it, but yeah, that's our first reaction and first take on that one.
Yeah.
Hey, let's move on to another one, shall we? Are there others that you have heard of that you want to jump into? I'll let you comment now, and then otherwise I'll make a suggestion. All righty.
Said at the outset, this is a totally blind response, kind of blind reaction.
I'm interested then in commenting on a couple that he does about about Christmas. So give me 1 second to find those. And let's see here. Jordan, let's see. Oh, he did one on Jordan Peterson. It's a 5-minute long one, though. I don't know that we want to watch something that long right now. So we have, let's see, some more Christmassy ones. Okay. Is Christmas a pagan holiday? Should we jump on that one?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's the conversation I've been having with my kids recently, actually.
Christmas is not a Christian holiday, it is a pagan holiday.
Hey everybody, I don't think this is an accurate statement. Certainly things like gift giving and revelry were borrowed from the celebration of Saturnalia, and many times we have pagan communities converting to Christianity and continuing some of their traditions. So we have pagans bringing evergreen boughs into the home, decorating with them, and then Protestants innovate on that in the 16th century in Germany and decorate full trees and then bring them into the home for Christmas. So there are relationships in some of the traditions, but those traditions differ wildly around the world. And already by 200 CE-ish, we have Christians identifying the 25th of December as Jesus' birthday based on ancient traditions about the date of someone's death relating to the date of their conception. 9 months later, we have their birth. And those calculations predate the arrival of Sol Invictus' celebration in Rome on the 25th. And Saturnalia seemed to be mostly celebrated the week before anyway.
Christmas is not a Christian holiday.
There you go. What are your thoughts?
How early did he say? By what year we had Christians already? Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So
That checks out with your understanding of the history.
sure. Yeah, I guess.
Dang, this is not something I'm super familiar with. I've heard a lot of talk around Yule and I don't know, the idea that it was almost like people really wanted to practice the tradition, so that Christianity co-opted it. I've heard that recently. I have no idea where it came from though. So
Yeah.
Sure. I
I'm
think
just
there's
talking, that's just hearsay, I guess. I don't know.
well, I mean, you've got yeah, we're out of bounds here. None of us know what we're talking.
Santa Claus, I heard, was a Christian thing added to some of the other traditions, but the Christmas tree itself was not a Christian thing originally, or there's been a bunch of things that were not.
Well,
yeah.
I just recently visited Stonehenge, and you've got these ancient, monolith structures and other calendars from all kinds of religions and things that indicate, following stars, following the light of the sun. And obviously the winter solstice has been one of several very important days for many religions, many peoples, many cultures dating back for, hundreds, thousands of years, that it would have been an important moment in people's lives as the winter grew colder and darker and the days of darkness, the days got shorter and shorter for the day when that all reversed, right? And everything started becoming brighter and lighter and warmer again. That was a day for rejoicing and a day for the light is coming back into the world. And it can be an argument for Christians co-opted this pagan day of celebration of the light coming back into the world. It can also be seen as a glorious sign that the one true God would actually send his son, the light of the world, into the world, essentially at the time of the winter solstice. And so whether I think either argument, either the Christians really wanted to celebrate this day that had been celebrated by cultures for thousands of years, and so they labeled that as Jesus's birthday, or it is Jesus's birthday and it's a fantastic day it happens to be a great day of promise when the light comes back into the world. I could see either way, but and I don't know that historically we can. Anyway, Joey, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, aren't we using a completely different calendar by now anyway? I mean, the way we've rejiggered the calendar, leap years and everything, like 15 different times. We were having this discussion, my kids and I recently, Abby apparently asked the cylinder lady, how old is Jesus? And the cylinder lady told her that Jesus will be 2025 this year. And that just sparked this whole conversation about why isn't he 2022 this year? And who started counting AD? And by the way, a lot of people think AD means after death, but it's Latin Anno Domini. It means the year of our Lord. There's a longer phrase, Anno Domini, something Jesu Christi. AD is Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, and it is dated from supposedly his conception. So 1 AD would be the year he was conceived, except that whoever invented it like in the 6th century or something, and someone else picked it up in like the 8th century and popularized it. And so we didn't actually start counting our years from Jesus's conception until somewhere in the 8th or 9th century. And they just got the math wrong. They were doing it based off of these regnal years. Like they would start over their years every time a new king was inaugurated into office or whatever. I'm saying that wrong. Coronated. What do they do with kings? They were counting their years there. And so they had these huge tables of like, this king was around for 25 years, that king was around for 50 years, this king was around for 3 years, and they would just add it all up, right? And there's also maybe some shenanigans. People believed the world was supposed to end in AD 500. And so by the time this guy was developing this, it was well past 500. And so he didn't want to freak people out. And so he might have added a few years to like make it really seem like it's been a while since 500 happened and the world didn't end, so the world's probably not going to end. Anyway, all of that is to say that undoubtedly we are not counting our years from the right spot. And so is it give or take 10 years on either side? When was Jesus born? When did he die? We don't know. That what he said in that video was interesting to me, and I quickly Googled it. And what he said was this ancient tradition of people believing that, and what I found when I Googled, and I don't know if he said it quite the same way in the video, what I found when I Googled was this ancient tradition that people believe that prophets die on the same day they're conceived, or the same day they're born. So then you do the math from the birth of Jesus back to when he was conceived, and you get December 25th. Wait, is that even correct though?
Conceived. It would have been the day he was conceived. Yeah.
December 25th? No, he was conceived on April 6th. The tradition was April 6th was the day he died. So if he was conceived on the same day he died, then he would have been conceived on April 6th and born on December 25th, roughly.
Yeah, something like that. And
Anyway,
that somebody did that math, came up with December 25th.
Right.
And once again, are we talking
Which
about
is super interesting to me.
Christmas is the Christ Mass? I know Catholics have all kinds of different masses venerating different saints, but the December 25th was the Mass for Christ, right? Or something like that. Is that?
I think if anybody believed it in those early couple of centuries of Christianity, if anyone actually believed Jesus was born on December 25th, almost no one does now. But it's the tradition.
So
that's the day we
the real
traditionally
question
celebrate
here,
it, and it kind of doesn't matter.
I'm not even certain that his very quick TikTok video, that once again, it's important to point out, has no supporting evidence, or it doesn't give any references or anything like that. It's just simply addressing,
it's him speaking off the cuff and not naming any sources.
Yeah. The argument is Christians stole their holiday from the pagans, and he doesn't even really address this idea of December 25th. He's really focused on the worship with the tree in the house and the traditions and things like that.
Sure.
Are we using pagan traditions? And he kind of said, he started by simply saying, he didn't say this is false. He said, I don't really believe this is accurate. So I think that's the summary of his position, which is, we've kind of adopted some pagan traditions and let people bring their traditions in here and there. And I would argue Christmas, I think you said it a minute ago, Joey, Christmas is celebrated differently around the world, like in different ways and on different dates.
It has been remarkable to me. The older I get and the more of these things that I look into and study, it's remarkable to me the number of things that I've thought go back thousands of years only go back 100 years. Boy, we've been doing that forever, haven't we? No, it's only been about 50 years, 100 years since somebody invented that. And we've just been doing it ever since. That only goes back about 2 or 3 generations or something, when it seems like, this has been around forever, right? Marty said something a second ago about Santa Claus being a Christian thing. And I think you're right. Santa Claus is based on Saint Nicholas. And I think Claus is actually some Germanic shortened name for Nicholas. Klaus, right?
Sinterklaas.
Sure.
Yeah. And
which is, but
you just say Saint Nicholas 3 times fast.
Saint Nick. Saint Nick.
No, say Saint Nicholas.
Oh, that's Sinterklaas. Yeah, sure. Well, so anyway, yes, Santa Claus or Saint Nick is based on the actual historical figure of Saint Nicholas. My favorite Christmas story, if you'll indulge me, have I told this story on the YouTube channel yet?
I don't believe so.
Apparently, the tradition goes, now we don't know if this is an actual historical fact. The tradition goes, St. Nicholas was present at the Council of Nicaea, and at one point when the conversation got so heated, the debate between Arius and the Nicene fathers, St. Nicholas apparently full out decked Arius in the face at one point, Santa Claus decked this guy who was spouting heretical views on the nature of God. That's my favorite Christmas story. If it's true, I don't know if it's true. Who knows? But Saint Nicholas was a real figure. Did he have reindeer? Did he have elves? Did he live at the North Pole? No, none of that.
And did he say, "Keep the change, you filthy animal"? After he decked him out.
I don't know. Who knows? But
because isn't that an ancient tradition too?
Yes.
All right.
That's gone back thousands of years, in fact. Yeah.
So, let's see. I was gonna look for another one here.
But to comment, I mean, at least like so. Certainly, Jehovah's Witnesses have problems with us celebrating these holidays because of their pagan connections. I don't know. I honestly don't remember because it's such an insignificant thing. Like when I was still a Latter-day Saint, how did I think about this, or did I ever think about this? I don't know. But certainly, since I've become an evangelical, like if this ever has come up in conversation, most of the conversation steers toward, well, yeah, early Christians kind of co-opted these pagan. It was a way of making the Christian message relevant to different cultures and stuff. And certainly after, like when with Paul, you know, and in the next couple of centuries, right, as the Christian message spread throughout the world, there were many places like this where they co-opted things in the culture to make their message more relevant. And, you know, was it all right for them to do that? I think opinions are mixed on that. But because there's a way to what is the word I was just looking for? There's a way to make the message relevant that sort of neuters the message of its content, right? And so how do you contextualize the message in a new culture without chopping off the most important parts of that message? Certainly if you listen to like a lot of evangelicals today, there's like a war on Christmas, and Christmas has become too materialized or whatever. And I don't know.
This has nothing to do with Dan McClellan, but
the direction we're trying to go in. But
this has
go
nothing
ahead,
to do
Steve.
with Dan McClellan, and
Cut me off because I'm just rambling now.
And I don't want to take this conversation in an entirely different direction, but I did watch recently a couple hour documentary on YouTube, and I don't even remember what channel originally published it, about Constantine and whether Constantine really was Christian, you know, whether he really you know, wanted people to worship Christ and himself converted, or whether he simply cobbled together, you know, aspects of a few different religions at the time into something that he thought he could more easily control the masses, and his own, you know, worship of himself. I mean, clearly he didn't seem to put any god before himself with all the statues of himself he built. And when he built named a new capital for his Roman Empire, he didn't name it after any god. He called it Constantinople, you know. So anyway, just all right, to move on. Let's watch another one here from Dan McClellan, that I think maybe this is one I saw today. I think maybe we can all agree with, but tell me if you've got some disagreement here.
Hey everybody, it's almost December, so it's time for some fun facts about the accounts of the Nativity in the Bible. And let's start with Luke 2:7. The famous phrase, "There was no room for them at the inn." If when you imagine this story, you imagine Joseph and Mary going door to door trying to find some accommodation, some vacancy, and finding none, and being forced to seek shelter under the roof of some barn or something like that in a field somewhere, that's because of a bad translation. The word that is traditionally translated "inn" means something more like sleeping quarters, bedroom. So according to the Greek narrative, they are at somebody's house, probably the house of a family member, but there's no room up on the second floor where people traditionally slept. So they had to go downstairs to where things were stored, to where food was prepared, to where the animals were kept, and that's where Jesus would have been born. Within the same house, downstairs, though not in the sleeping quarters. So we should probably revise how we imagine this story. It's not about them unable to find a vacancy in any inns and being forced to huddle under a shed somewhere.
Wow, that changes the story quite a bit.
Does it
How
though?
so? Why do you think? Yeah, I don't feel like it does. Why do you think it does, Marty?
Well, because of every nativity that's set up in every house.
We've been setting up nativities for thousands of years, probably.
And every nativity in every house sets up three wise men, and we've been at least told over the course of my life over and over again, we don't know how many wise men there were, right? So does the depiction of the nativity matter so much?
Right. I'm not saying that it matters to whether
Quick
Jesus
Google
was
says
born.
the first nativity ever was set up in 1223 by Francis of Assisi. So
that's like almost exactly 800 years ago.
Yeah.
don't know. I guess I just think it's interesting how that symbolism has evolved. And when it's disconnected from reality, that's just interesting. I don't know. That's interesting that you would celebrate something so much that didn't ever happen. If that's true.
Okay. Joey, any thoughts? So you're willing to agree with him on this, or now again, he presented no evidence. We just kind of trust him as some kind of a biblical scholar and interpreting, and he basically just said the word "in" is misinterpreted, it's bad translation, and then he gave us another one.
Mm-hmm.
Does it pique my interest to go study it more? Maybe. Will I stuff this fact in the back of my brain somewhere, and it will come up like 3 Christmases from now when someone says something, and I can go, well, actually, I don't know. Does it change what's important about the Christmas story? And I would say no.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, did anybody ever think the nativity that we set up was accurate? Like, I don't think that's the point of it. Does that make sense? Like, I just don't understand why.
In fact, another argument is that the shepherds didn't come at the same time as the wise men, and that the wise men were following the star. The star supposedly appeared at the time of the birth of Christ, and then they followed it, which would have taken them forever to get there, and they didn't find him on the night of his birth, and present him with gifts. So the whole nativity, and I think I've heard this kind of thing for years and years, that our depiction in our brain, the mental depiction and the story that we show on stages and that we put up in our yards isn't accurate. Interestingly, when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has recently made videos depicting kind of the story, the birth of Christ, many of these things are depicted in slightly untraditional ways that might be more accurate. For this example, when the wise men show up, they show up when the child looks like he's a couple years old, which is what he talks to Herod and says, when did the star appear? Right. And then later we learn that Herod supposedly had all the children killed under 2 years of age because of when the wise men said the star appeared. Yeah. So they didn't show up until at least his first birthday, and because they, anyway.
And the other thing is
Sorry.
You go first.
I was just going to say, there's some point, there's this level of uninteresting to me. Like, it's like, I don't care about having the argument. Like, it doesn't mean anything different one way or the other.
This is not a hill that any of us need to die.
No. Yeah. Like, I don't, I have the similar feelings about atheist and theist debates too. I'm like, I think you're arguing about the wrong thing.
Really good. Last thing I want to say on this. This is a case
where I'm more liable to agree with him because he's interpreting the Bible. Like he's taking a Greek word, in the New Testament, and he's defining it. He's doing what's that? Like a lexicon, it's a word study, right? It's a word study of the Greek words. And so I'm more likely to follow him there. Like he's not bringing up arguments that have brought forth by critical scholarship or anything like that, so I don't know.
I think you'd be surprised.
But again, my tendency to either agree or disagree with him is all based on my confirmation bias anyway. I'll lay all those cards on the table.
There you go. I think we probably all are that way. And speaking of that confirmation bias, again, I have heard other people in the course of my lifetime talk about this specific aspect of, look, in that day, people didn't travel to a city and then look for an inn. It's not like they looked for the Holiday Inn, a place to stay. They had no idea. I don't know. We'll get ourselves a room somewhere. They were clearly traveling to a place where they had family. They would have stayed with family, and there was no innkeeper who turned them out. It doesn't make any sense to say that there was just no room in the inn. They went to family, and there was something, like he said, about just not having room in the normal space where you would think to have a baby. That seems to be the issue here that Luke was getting at, was, look, this baby was born in not the best of circumstances. And that's
the point, is that when he came in his incarnation, he didn't come as royalty. He didn't come as a rich, king or prince. He was born in
not born in this building behind me right here.
he had a lowly station. He was a commoner. He was the son of a carpenter. That's what's important to the narrative. Precisely where it happened. Certainly wherever it happened was still a lot like a stable. If there were animals there, if he was like, I would be interested in a word study on the word manger, right? Like they laid him in some kind of feeding trough for animals, unless that word also has another definition that this guy can pull forward and say, no, actually it wasn't really a feeding trough. It was some other thing, he made it sound like, at least the way he explained it briefly, was that there were animals present in this room, and so it still seems like an awfully similar room. So it's an interesting little like, well, actually, but does it change anything? I don't know.
All right, going to jump to another one.
We're going to keep using the nativity, I guess.
Still sticking to the Christmas theme here. Let's go with this one. There's two more that I want to look at. I don't know how long we've been going here. Give me just a second we have been going for, give me a second here. Whoop. Hang on a second. Let's see. 40 minutes. Okay. So we'll tap on a couple more real quick. And one of them is our Luke 1 and 2 late additions to the gospel. So let me get us there. And
hey everybody, more fun facts about the accounts of the Nativity. Did you know Luke's account in Luke 1 and 2 is thought by many scholars to have been a later addition to the Gospel of Luke? And they have a few reasons for thinking this. One, the Greek of Luke 1 and 2 differs from the Greek of the rest of the Gospel of Luke. The rest of the Gospel of Luke also refers back to events at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, but never refers to the unique miraculous events of Luke 1 and 2. It's like it doesn't know about it. Luke 3 is where we would expect this Gospel to begin, with this broad establishing shot. Here's the time, here's the place, and then we move into John the Baptist introducing Jesus, baptizing Jesus. This is much closer to how Mark, one of Luke's main sources, began their Gospel. But then we move into Jesus' genealogy, which makes sense if Luke 3 is the beginning of the gospel, but not if we've already had 2 chapters of great detail about the circumstances surrounding Jesus' conception and birth. To then go, and here's his adulthood, here's his baptism, oh, by the way, here's his genealogy. That doesn't really fit the pattern. And so for this and other reasons, many scholars think that these 2 chapters were added later, and in part to move back the divinity of Jesus from a more adoptionist Christology, where it is achieved at his baptism, as in Mark, to a Christology similar to Matthew's, where it is something declared at his conception and birth. And then John is going to move it back further and say, no, it predates creation. Hey, everybody, more fun.
Well, I'll speak first on this and just say that this is why I initially reacted to Marty's label of the apologist, because where the first video we watched together clearly seemed to be defending and potentially apologizing, well, being an apologist, but defending the position of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This one is almost more attacking of the Bible and Christianity, and I would, in just the few videos I've watched of him. By the way, I had not watched this one prior to right now, but so I've now seen close to 10 videos by him, and I'm almost as likely to see a video by him that I think almost kind of attacks the general understanding of the Bible as even my own, as I am to see something that defends a certain Christian position. And that's why I felt like, he doesn't seem to be an apologist. He just seems to be trying to in TikTok fashion, lay out what he sees are the facts. So there's my first response to that. What are your thoughts? Luke 1 and 2, late editions? No, what do you think? Joey probably has more to say about this, but Marty, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead, Joey. I don't know. Like I look at the Bible way differently probably than you guys do. So I just, I don't know what to add to what he said.
So commenting directly on his video, it's another video where he's just kind of like off the cuff. Here's a factoid. And I noticed he never says, and I think XYZ. He kept saying some scholars think XYZ, and he lays out 3 or 4 arguments, but it seems like he's just telling us what the arguments are that are made by these other scholars. He never at any point in that little TikTok video said whether he agrees with those scholars or not. Maybe he does. Why would he share this stuff if he doesn't on some level agree with them or think that their arguments have merit? But he didn't side one way or the other with those scholars or against them. So from that standpoint, I don't know that I can even argue with him, right? He's right. Some scholars do believe that. If that's the argument he's making, then he's spot on and I can't disagree, right? So then I guess the task becomes, well, do I want to disagree with those other scholars or not, right? And this is one where it's serving exactly the purpose he wants it to, I think, is like, hey, if this piques your interest, go and research it. And this is one that I'm kind of interested to go research. I use a copy of the United Biblical Society Greek New Testament. I think it's in the 5th edition now, and I own a copy of it. So this is one I will go back to, like Luke 1 and Luke 2 and check the footnotes and see like what are the earliest manuscripts, what's the earliest manuscript evidence we have for Luke 1 and Luke 2, and certainly if it's a later edition, it probably couldn't possibly have been added after about the 2nd or 3rd century, because otherwise it would have little brackets around it in my Bible. Most modern Bibles will put brackets around things that were later additions to the text. We've had conversations about that, me and Steve.
Yeah, he didn't say just how much later. It may have been a later.
Right.
Was it? And even if it was written later, was it written by Luke? Was it something that he tacked on himself 10 years later and was like, I should address this?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just as a little side note, do we know about who are the authors of the Gospels? Like, are they? Mm-hmm. We do know about who the authors of the Gospels are.
There's pretty good ideas about who they are. Yeah.
So my understanding is that the Gospels were written after, not during the time of Jesus. Right, they were written at best 60 years later or 100 years later.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's no firsthand accounts. Possibly, there's possibly a firsthand account, but we don't know.
There would have still been people living who could have given firsthand accounts, and Luke claims in both the preamble to his gospel and the preamble to Acts, his sort of volume 2 of his historical account. In both of those, he indicates, if I'm not mistaken, I know it's at least at the beginning of Acts, he indicates that he interviewed a bunch of people and consulted all of the source documents. And even though he wasn't an eyewitness, he talked to many eyewitnesses and compiled his account from that.
But John and Matthew are eyewitnesses. If they are who they say they are. If the authors are who they say they are. They are apostles.
True. John was an apostle. Matthew was an apostle. Luke was a traveling companion of Paul on a lot of his mission journeys, and so the apostolic authority of the Gospel of Luke comes from Paul. And Mark was Mark one of the apostles, or was he was a companion of Peter on a lot of his journeys? And so I think the apostolic stamp for the Gospel of Mark comes from Peter, if I'm not mistaken.
Is Mark one of the latest ones?
Mark actually is first.
One of the earliest?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark's one of the earliest ones.
Which one of the 4 Gospels is the latest?
John.
Okay.
If it was written by John, which I believe it was written after he was exiled to the island of Patmos.
And John's is different from the other 3, where scholars think and believe that Matthew and Luke basically took much of their source material from Mark. So, and if you want to look more into that, I recommend the.
Certainly you could look at this as just Luke. So Luke was doing his homework. He was trying to put together a solid account, a historic, accurate account of what happened. He lifted a lot of material from Mark and certainly tacked Luke 1 and 2 on the front of that. No one would dispute that. So when did he do that, though? There's the claim that's being made here that it was done well after the fact or something, but
Yeah,
I don't
the
think
question
anyone would
being raised
dispute
is,
that he
does
added that
make Luke?
content, because
Yeah.
Luke is the only one that has that content. So if whatever he lifted from Mark, he did absolutely tack Luke 1 and 2 on the front of that. I don't think it's not even something you could debate if you wanted to. I guess the question is just when, how much later did it get tacked
and
on?
does that nullify its veracity because it was tacked on later?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Because it does, of course, seem to be tacked on later. Marty, I do recommend a couple videos by the YouTube channel Useful Charts. They do some videos about that I think are quite accurate on what scholars generally think about who wrote each book in the Bible. So that's from a scholarly standpoint, who is the author, the most supported author. Okay, let's do one more.
Everybody, let's talk about another fun fact about the Nativity, Luke's account of the census in Luke 2. There was a census that took place in Judea. However, most of what's said in Luke does not align with the historical data. To begin, the census was not so that Caesar could tax the world. The census was so that Rome could know how to administer Judea and allocate resources and leadership and things like that, because in 6 CE, they took over direct rule of Judea from Herod Archelaus, one of Herod the Great's sons, whom they had just deposed for his gross incompetence. And so they sent in Quirinius to conduct the census so they could know how to administer that region. Now, the way Luke tells it does not align with the data. For instance, there's absolutely no reason they would have had people have to travel to the place of their birth. That would have totally nuked the economy for weeks, if not months, and would have given them useless data. Since the question was not how many people were born in any given city, the question was where are people living and working. Additionally, no one in Nazareth would have been involved because that was not a part of Herod Archelaus' realm. That was still under the control of Herod Antipas and would remain so until after Jesus' death. Finally, none of this is reconcilable with the account of Matthew, which has Jesus being born before the death of Herod the Great, which took place 10 years prior to this census.
All right. Thoughts on that one? Again, this is less, I'm not, it's less defending the Bible, Christianity. It's just kind of, hey, Luke 2's account, a little bit wrong.
And here so much, he's not even saying some scholars believe, like he's just presenting this as
true. Yeah.
This is the evidence.
Without actually presenting where he got his evidence, he's just saying, this doesn't align with this. Here's the data. Here's the data. Here's the data. And we just got to believe him. Or we got to go look it up.
There's one thing with the way he's framing it that he makes it sound like we have a pretty good idea of what it was like back then. And I mean, we can paint as good of a picture as we can paint, but it's been a long time. So it's hard hearing that certain.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see a photograph of the fragment of pottery that he found that says this is when the census was done. Right?
I would argue that it's probably not a fragment of pottery. This is probably a very important date. If this census did occur, this is probably something very much visible in the historical record, because a census is nothing if it's not recorded data somewhere, and it's probably found and verified in several historical points that there was some kind of a census that had happened, and then of course we can understand he's just suggesting also what would be the purpose of such a census, and so his arguments to me on face seem valid, and I'm willing to agree with. But what does that do to the Bible story? And why would Luke tell it in some way that contradicts the data?
Right, and the thing about it too. Okay, this is an argument that's made by the likes of do you guys familiar with Lee Strobel? He has a series of books like The Case for Christ, The Case for the Resurrection, The Case for Easter, The Case for whatever. It's probably from him where I first encountered an argument that goes something like this. And here I am doing the same thing that Dan was doing in his video. Some scholars say, so I don't know whether I will ultimately agree with Lee Strobel or not, but somebody like Lee Strobel says, like, there were eyewitnesses that were still living at the time when these documents were published. And if any of the data in them was inaccurate, someone would have corrected it, right? And we don't have anything in the historical record of anyone disagreeing or saying that, oh, all of Luke's data is garbage, Now, I'm also doing the same thing Dan said earlier, like, oh, there are no writings prior to X that contradict this. And the fact of the matter is that there are almost no writings, right? We have like one historian from the early centuries, Josephus, who mentions Jesus in passing, right? So there just is a dearth of information out there in the historical record of like what people thought of Luke's gospel when it was published. We don't have any contemporary book reviews of Luke's gospel, when it was published. But there's an argument that goes, oh, well, if there was substantial errors in what Luke was saying, someone would have raised a stink about that. Someone would have, because there were still people living who could have corrected that, who knew the history of it. So I don't know what to think of those arguments. This is another thing that's piqued my interest that makes me want to go research. It makes me want to open up study Bibles and see like, well, because so when I first left the LDS church, I picked up a Bible. It was a New American Standard Bible, but it had the same study notes. So about half the page was the Bible text, and the other half of the page was these Bible study notes. It was the same study notes from the NIV Study Bible, which is a very popular study Bible, and it went into, especially in the Old Testament, it went into like the history of like, oh, this prophecy that Elijah is making was fulfilled in the near term in this way when these events took place 10 or 20 years later, and it was so interesting to me to get that added context as I was studying the Bible. And I'm almost certain that there's going to be added context when we talk about something like this census. So there will be notes that are supplied by again, faithful Christian scholars who are going to toe the party line, right? And try to fit whatever historical record does exist, try to like shoehorn it into the Bible narrative. So take that with a grain of salt, right? They're coming at this with a bias, but it makes me interested to go and read like, what do my Bible study notes say in a couple of different study Bibles about this? And then go and from there and figure out, what's the source material? Where's he getting this idea from?
Marty, do you have anything to say about that?
But not being a Bible scholar, it's again another question that I can't adjudicate on because I just don't know. So
I don't know, like there's the value that I find in the Bible isn't based on its historicity, so I'm not super concerned about that stuff. It's fascinating to learn about it, but
and I think that most people who talk about the Bible in a scholarly fashion are recognizing today, and it's a refrain that I hear over and over again today, and it may be because we're finding so many inaccurate historical things that the scholars like to emphasize over and over that, look, the authors of the Bible, including that useful charts guy who takes it from kind of a scholarly aspect, but the authors of the Bible were simply not concerned with historical accuracy the way that we are today with our historical books and biography.
That was a comment I almost made earlier when we were talking about the idea that prophets are always born and die on the same date. If that really is a tradition, then that's one thing. But without even a tradition like that, did anyone bother to keep track of the day they were born? Did they celebrate birthdays the way we do? Did they keep track of history? Did they keep track of dates and times the way we did? They did not, because they didn't have video cameras, they didn't have tape recorders, they didn't have any way to document
birth certificates
the world and historical events the way we can document historical events. And so when we think of history, we have this modern Western idea of like being able to accurately, slice and dice precisely what happened. And in the ancient world, they just did not have that. And so,
the article,
they knew roughly the years when people were born and died, but they would just choose to celebrate their birth on whatever day made sense. And
we can see that in the Bible itself.
They knew
in the first year of the reign of this king, this thing happened. And
they knew that their dates weren't accurate, and they didn't care. They weren't going for perfect historical accuracy the way we would think about that now with our modern brains. And so that's another reason why I'm not bothered by celebrating Jesus's birthday on December 25th. I know that it's not the right date, and that doesn't bother me. I can still celebrate it because I think it's an important thing to celebrate, and we ought to set aside time, at least annually, if not every Lord's Day, every Sunday, right, to celebrate Jesus. So yeah.
Right.
Sorry
So,
to totally hijack the point you were making.
But that's just it, is that they were more concerned with the narrative that they were making, the story in support of God in the Bible, than they were, or in support of some king, than they were of specific dates and things. I just want to wrap up with addressing a comment. We actually have a live viewer, a Jared Higdon, who has commented on our YouTube channel, yeah, so if anybody's watching, thanks for watching. So he comments that glad someone is covering McClellan. Someone, us, the guy. I mean, right. Jana Reese covered him in the Tribune. The guy strikes me as very bad faith. That's interesting. I'm wondering why so. But he says, if I remember correctly, his degree is in linguistics, and it was in Near Eastern Studies, at least his undergrad. And it sounds like his doctorate was in something having to do with religion, because he was working with some postdoctorate people who also did theses in that area. But anyway, then he says, problem is that a lot of Dan's videos are very niche linguistic analysis, and most of us can't really take it on. Yeah, I'd agree with that there. And also, as we've already presented, he doesn't present a lot of evidence. He just kind of spits out what he understands and knows. And he says, but every now and then he does something that all of us can tell is nonsense. Now, I've commented back that I would like an example of that one. I haven't seen in our few videos we've watched, or in anything I've seen today, as something that all of us can see is just nonsense. So any thoughts on that? It sounds to me in conclude. Go ahead, Marty.
I think it's when it gets into some of the more political stuff that he covers, because he does have some political videos too.
Well, there you go. Maybe we need to turn our attention to some of that. Yeah, you said something about there are some videos out there about abortion that we may need to look at. I know that he's going to do a series coming up here on homosexuality in the Bible. I'm interested to check that out and what he has to say about that, what he thinks the Bible says on those topics. So I'm going to be diving in more. Again, this is the first day that I've come across him, only having watched, a few videos now. And so I'm interested to follow and see what he has to say. And I think in summary of what we've come across today, he's doing TikTok videos, which means that they are, got to be kind of clickbaity, and they're direct responses, and they're very fast, and they don't have a lot of evidence supporting their position, but he has
or he could have a long video not backing up his position.
Jenna Reese mentions that he has he's shifting now. I found some of his videos here on YouTube, and he's shifting. He might try to make some more YouTube with some more evidence and whatever, but this isn't his full-time gig. He actually does work for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints full-time. And but this guy, I would say, where I like to make some kind of biblical and religious arguments, and we do these kind of conversations, I don't have the background this guy has. So it's kind of fun to listen to see what he has to say. Somebody else just commented here saying, hey, at the 36-minute mark. I don't know what else they want to say, but hey, welcome. Thanks anybody who's watching. All right, guys, thanks for joining me today. We'll talk again soon. Have a good one.
Bye.
Here's my